Last time we did this, we looked at the most compatible ATX cases. This time I want to explore the least compatible ATX cases out there, as in taking all case components into account, what are the top 10 cases that can fit the least overall. Like last time, this list has been generated through the specification comparison tab of my PC case review spreadsheet, which I use to gauge the market for specification comparison. While I have done my best to cover all the extremes, it is limited to about 300 cases at this moment, so if I've missed something glaringly obvious, please give me a heads up in the comments and I'll hopefully get around to updating the spreadsheet with more cases in time. Anyway, that's enough of that. Let's get stuck into number 10 of the least compatible ATX cases on the market. The least of the top 10 least compatible ATX cases is the Asus CS802F. Oh yeah, these kind of cases tend to get noticed in quirky top 10 lists. They're just not that efficient with their space. What really lets this case down, which is the same for the first 6 on the list really, is its drive support, fan support, and radiator support. You've got space for up to 2 3.5-inch and 2 2.5-inch drives, which is decent. You can throw in a set of 4 120mm fans up front and a single 120mm fan in the rear. And due to some dodgy English, it's not entirely clear whether you can install 2 240mm radiators in the front or just the one. But come on, realistically, you're not getting this case because it's a bastion of compatibility. It's a showcase, and you can forgive a lacking feature set if you need the rare style it provides. In at number 9, it's the Asus Tough Gaming GT301. And that's surprising since on the outside it looks like any other ATX case. It's lacking any special compatibility in the drive fan and radiator support area, much like the Asus, but it's the tighter 160mm power supply unit clearance that brings this case just a touch down below the Asus at number 10. Keeping the pace up, mainly because there's not a lot of difference in the first 6, in at number 8 is the Cooler Master Masterbox Q500L. Now, this isn't too surprising since it's one of the smaller ATX cases that doesn't skimp on full-size components. No 80mm space saver fans here. Much like its thermal performance, there's not a lot going on in the compatibility department. We're back up to 180mm of power supply unit clearance, but dragging the Q500L down, or up the list, is the lousy 2 3.5-inch drive support. It's either that or 1 3.5-inch drive and 2 2.5-inch drives, but that scores equally in my table. Fan support is pretty lacking, but radiator support is much reduced to a 240 and a 120mm radiator. And for a case with thermal performance as it is, you'll need as much radiator space as you can get. Number 7 on the list is the Zalman S2. While it's lacking in compatibility, I do appreciate a clean name. Good job the name is nice and short, otherwise we might be forced to fit even less into this thing. Drive support is a touch better in this case, back up to 2 3.5 inches and 2 2.5-inch drives, but the radiator support has dropped even further down to a mere 2 120mm radiators. That's official. I'm sure you could try and squeeze a 240 up front. For a 35-litre case, that's pretty stingy. The PCI Express section is a bit tighter on this one with 7 slots, which is fine, and 330mm of depth clearance, which is getting towards a little tight for longer cards. Our number 6 is Selenium Pcs Armis AR1. While the AR1 is extremely affordable at around $60, that's converted to US dollars since it's not sold in the States, and it's quite compact at 29 litres, and it's got decent drive support at a couple of 3.5-inch and a few 2.5-inch drives, it's really lacking in fan support since it opts for a 5.25-inch bay, which brings the front fans and radiator support down to 2 120mm fans and a 240mm radiator. But it also maxes out at an 80mm fan to the rear, which solidifies its position in at number 6. Numero 5, it's the Sliger Cerberus X, and this one completely makes sense to be here. It's the smallest ATX case on my list, and according to Sliger in the world, 23.4 litres. Even at such a small size, you've got 8 PCI Express slots, and the standard is 7 for ATX, so 8, an extra bonus one there, and up to 330mm of GPU length clearance. There's room for up to 2 3.5-inch drives, which is pretty decent for its size, and even a couple of 240mm radiators is solid. But its overall compatibility is very slightly reduced in nearly all areas compared to the previous, and that's why it's number 5 on the list. I need to get a few more Sliger cases in my spreadsheet. They've got some really cool stuff. Now this is where the very limited compatibility is at. In number 4 is the DIY PC Solo T2. This thing is disgustingly cheap at $40. So we can forgive a poor show to a certain degree. And honestly, if you're not looking to water cool, it's not all that bad. 160mm CPU cooler support, 7 PCI Express slots, and 375mm of graphics card depth clearance, 160mm of ATX power supply unit clearance, and even space for 3 3.5-inch drives. Heck, you even got a 5.25-inch bay if you wanted one. But it's the cooling where this case falls down. 120mm fan up front, 120mm fan to the rear, and according to the webpage, it can take 2 120mm fans on the side panel. I'm not sure how, so you can back-to-back them, but I mean, so can any case. I'm not sure how they're thinking that, but I'll just call it as one, which feels like we can exist on the same planet. 3 120mm fans, that's not too bad for cooling. It's not awful, sure, but there's no official radiator support. I guess you can officially put a couple of 120mm fans on the side panel too, so sure, you probably might be able to fit a rear 120mm radiator. But I'm erring on the side of caution regarding my spreadsheet, so none it is. Number 3 shares a feature of the previous, and that's no official radiator support. Brought to you by SilverStone, it's the GD09B. And that's completely forgivable since it's an awesome case as it stands. Just a pinch larger than the Sliger at 27 litres, but in a completely different form factor. 7 vertical expansion slots with an extra single horizontal slot if you've got a particularly specialized need for it. I mean, it's just a single slot, so that's very specialized. And up to 3 3.5-inch drive with a single 2.5-inch drive. But what really brings it down, like the Solo T2, is the cooling support. Up to a couple of 80mm fans in the rear and a couple of 120mm fans, to one side, and a single to the other. And that's not actually too bad, but there's no official radiator support whatsoever, so combined with the lesser 138mm CPU cooler clearance, it drags it down to number 3. Runner-up for the least compatible ATX case is the Azure Pyramid 804V. Just looking at this thing, you can just tell it's not making the most of that footprint, but that's not the point of this case. In fact, that's probably closer to the opposite of the point of this case. Standout features, or lacking features I guess, are numbers like 95mm of CPU cooler clearance, 280mm of graphics card length support, space for a single 3.5-inch and a couple of 2.5-inch drives, up to 4 120mm fans, 1 up top and 3 down below, and room for a single 360mm radiator. And it's the CPU cooler support that's really dragging it down to number 2. Most cases on the market sit at around 155 160mm of CPU cooler clearance, so anything less like 95, that's nearly half the score in that particular category. And since none of the other cases shone particularly brightly regarding drive, fan and radiator support, that's what killed it for the Pyramid 804V. So that begs the question, why am I going on about this case so much when number 1 is right around the corner? Well, that's because number 1 is the Azure Pyramid 804. Yes, it's a SKU of the Pyramid case, but this one really pushes style over substance to another level. 7 vertical PCI Express slots not working for you? How about 2 horizontal slots? 95mm of CPU cooler clearance, too generous? Try 80mm. I think it's fair to say this is the least efficient use of such a massive case. I mean, come on, 80mm of CPU cooler support when the case is 590mm tall? Yeah. From a top-down perspective, it just looks like a Thermaltake Core P3 with a fancy cover. Speaking of which, if you like Thermaltake cases, you should really check out the top 10 most compatible ATX cases video I made last time. Turns out Thermaltake make a lot of really big cases that can cram in an eye-watering amount of kit. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video and maybe even spotted a few cases that you didn't know about before. Not that I'd necessarily recommend all of them. If you did happen to want to pick up one of these cases and want to thank me for bringing it to your attention, you could always use the Amazon associate links in the video description. They'll take you right to your regional store. I will earn through purchases made through those links. Let me know if you think I've missed anything that should have been on this list. Like and subscribe for more. Thanks to my patrons for their unwavering support. Thanks for checking this one out, and I'll catch you in the next one.